Every year around this time, we get to the PGA Championship, and lots of people wonder about the connection between the PGA of America and the PGA Tour, and in this video, we're happy to talk about that and explain the difference between the two organizations to you. I'm Ryan Ballingy with Golf News Net. As I mentioned, we get the PGA Championship every year in May these days, and a lot of people get confused, particularly casual sports fans, thinking that the PGA Tour and the PGA of America, which presents the PGA Championship, are one and the same, and they are not. However, that isn't necessarily rooted a belief totally out of thin air, because for a long time that was the case. For the better part of a half century, that was the case, up until 1968. So before then, before 1968, the PGA of America ultimately formed a tournament committee, and their club pro members, their membership association, their board, basically was in charge of creating and financing and putting on tournaments for not only professional golfers, but also golf professionals. And those are different things. Golf professionals are your club pros, your teaching professionals, people like that. Pro golfers are players who play golf for a living. And they used to put on tournaments that had some exempt status, but not much. And that was a really difficult situation for a lot of professional golfers who would travel around the country, would have to pay their travel expenses, pay their caddies, pay for accommodations, and potentially not even qualify for events because they weren't exempt, and they would have to go through an 18-hole Monday qualifier, and that may leave them deeply in the hole for the week. This all came to a head in the late 1960s, eventually leading to a change in 1968 after most of the best golfers in the world at the time, including Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus and Billy Casper, threatening to form and eventually forming a breakaway organization called the APG, Association of Professional Golfers. Ultimately, they called the PGA of America's bluff, who were not willing to give the players more power and more say over what happens in their tournaments and their livelihood. Eventually, though, both sides came together, largely thanks to the efforts of Arnold Palmer and some other players as well, including Jack Nicklaus. And ultimately, they hammered out a deal which created two separate organizations within the PGA of America. There would be the PGA of America and the Tournament Players Division. And that was what is now known as the PGA Tour. Ultimately, 5 years into it, a guy named Dean Beeman became the commissioner of what would then become the PGA Tour, and that's why they still use the PGA nomenclature today in what we call the PGA Tour, because of that connection to the PGA of America for so long, representing the brand as professional golf tour as opposed to separate organization, the PGA of America. Hopefully this clears everything up. The PGA of America still puts on tons of championships for club professionals and the PGA Championship. Also, they own the American half in full of the Ryder Cup, so they still do a lot of work to put on great tournaments for people. And many of them are professional golfers, most of them at the PGA Championship, but they also put on a lot of events for club pros whose livelihoods are engaged in growing the game of golf.